listening to episode 104 of Mitolife Radio. I am Matt Blackburn, and this is the final episode of 2020. It feels really weird. This year flew by. I guess when things are busy and crazy, time goes a lot faster. To me, it felt like this year was like 3 or 4 months long. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. Or maybe for some, it was a lot longer. Maybe it's different because I'm out here, kind of out of the city in the woods, and so time is somewhat distorted. But I've had so much fun having different people on the show and finding interesting people to interview, and building this community has been really mind-blowing, beyond words, actually, because I'm just so grateful to connect to people that actually want to help people. And I really think that that's the most important thing, is that someone has the intention to help people. Because I've been studying health for the last decade. I started at my parents' house with a little YouTube channel that was called Divine Superconductor TV. My first video was a coffee enema tutorial. It was a half-hour long. And since then, I've really gone through the ringer of extreme failing. And I didn't expect working on my physical health would have such a dramatic impact on my psychological, emotional, spiritual health. I knew that it was all connected, but I had no idea how deeply it was all connected. And where I'm at now is that physical health is the priority, is the most important thing. And maybe I'll get into this later in the episode, but I feel that if our antenna to reality is not working, aka our brain cells, our neurons, our brain, then it's like looking through a foggy lens. We won't be able to see in front of us clearly. And I'm not saying I'm above this. I'm not saying I have rose above that. I'm still in it. We're all still in it. To me, that is a humble thing to say. And it's funny, if you follow me on Instagram, I'll trigger people sometimes by calling myself mentally handicapped / retarded. And I think that that is just being real. You know, we could talk about the terminology and all of that, but, you know, however you want to say it, we've been handicapped severely at the physical, mental level. A lot of people are familiar with vaccines, genetically modified foods, geoengineering spraying, heavy metals, mold. Our homes are conducive to mold. But how about NPK fertilizer? That's never talked about. How about acid rain? That's never talked about. How about biosludge in our food? How about tap water grown vegetable juice? Those things aren't talked about. And so when you get out of conventional and you go to alternative health, it's not that much better than conventional. You're still getting slammed drinking that quote-unquote organic food. Guys, nothing's clean. So good luck looking for the perfect supplement. Good luck looking for the perfect food, because everything is contaminated to the core. And that could be a depressing perspective for some people. It's the red pill, the matrix. But you mitigate. So this is where I see people, you know, whether it's spiritually or physically, people are trying to be perfectionists, and that never works, especially in today's world. You'll go nuts. And in fact, you'll actually go in circles. You won't even make progress moving forward. So it's about balance. It's about realizing that we have to do our best, that nothing is perfect, and that there are solutions. That's why I started Mitolife Radio. That's why I started Mitolife, my products, my CLF protocol. to share solutions, because I look out there at the alternative health community. I say, I want to get out of that. I want to get to alternative health and share that with you guys. Because, the convidiots are telling you, take zinc, take ascorbic acid, take omega-3s, take secosteroid, hormone, quote unquote, vitamin D. That's all horrible advice. Why? Because it screws with your retinol, vitamin A, and it screws with your bioavailable copper. Can't make bioavailable copper without retinol. All four of those things screw with that. And if you want to get deeper into that, my episodes with Morley Robbins were excellent about that subject of minerals, but I've also talked about that with a lot of guests in the metabolic health community. So I'm going to stop tiptoeing around. Let's get right to the meat of the show. Spirituality. And I just want to preface this with saying that I'm not trying to change anybody. I'm not trying to deconvert anybody. If you are comfortable in your beliefs and it gives you peace and it's not stressing you out and you're not holding on to extreme guilt for just being a human being alive and breathing on this planet, then more power to you. I support you fully, and I hope that this podcast and my work can continue to help you on your journey in life on all levels. And of course, Mitolife Radio mostly focuses on the physical aspect of health. But of course, it's all connected. And I experienced, actually, about a month and a half ago, a quote unquote physical injury that was 100% psychological, emotional, spiritually caused. And I know that for a fact. So before I get into that, I'll start from the very beginning. I was raised in a traditional American family. Thankfully, my parents were not divorced like a lot of kids experienced. They stayed together, and they still are together. But I was raised Christian Catholic, which is kind of an extreme form of Christianity. And I went to Catholic school once a week for 11 years. It was called CCD. And to be honest, I don't remember one thing from that 11 years that stood out to me. But I know that 11 years of information went somewhere in my brain and is still there to this day. Because even if we don't consciously remember something, our subconscious is like a tape recorder that's going all the time. It hears everything. It remembers everything. That's why hypnosis works so well, which I've done. It's a real thing. So I know that all of those beliefs and all of what I was taught was integrated into my system. While attending Catholic school, I was having a lot of paranormal experiences. And I've talked to a lot of friends since then and asked them about their childhood, if they had similar things happen. And 90% of the time, it'll be no. And people just kind of get into studying, ghosts and all of these things later. But I didn't know about any of that. I wasn't watching scary movies, ghost movies, yet I was having experiences. And these experiences included seeing shadow people, which is a thing. It's just a black silhouette in the middle of the day. Saw that multiple times. The most profound experience I had as a child was waking up in the middle of my parents. I was a little old to be sleeping in their bed, but something scared me, and I wanted to sleep with them that night, so they let me. And I woke up in the middle of the night to the whole room being so bright, and somehow my mom and dad were still sleeping through the brightness. And I opened my eyes to see what was causing this huge glow that lit up the entire bedroom. And at the door, there was a forearm, maybe from a little past the elbow onward, that was beckoning me with the fingers that were moving, kind of like waving me over. And I remember it clear as day. the arm and the hand looked like if you ever saw Star Wars, where one of the Jedis died and they had that blue glow. It was like that. I could see through it. It was a bluish color and it was glowing. There was kind of like a white light going all around it. And I was scared. So I don't know how I went back to sleep. It must have put me back to sleep, or else I wouldn't have been able to fall asleep. I just put the covers over my face. And I think about 3 times, because I thought I was dreaming, I took the covers down and looked again. And it wasn't a dream. It was real life. My heart was racing. And somehow I fell asleep again. And I had a lot of things like that happen. Meanwhile, I was into lucid dreaming because my older brother introduced me to it. And so I was on a lucid dreaming forum on the internet reading all these techniques and tips, not only to improve dream recall, to just simply remember dreams easier, but techniques to stay in the dream when it starts getting fuzzy and you start waking up, spinning around, ways to tell that you're dreaming, flipping a light switch and seeing if it goes on. If it doesn't, then you're likely dreaming. And I didn't become an expert at lucid dreaming. I feel at this point in my life that's a little unnatural and perhaps even dangerous. By that I mean lucid dreaming every single night. That doesn't sound good to me. But I had quite a few that were all positive. My first lucid dream was being chased by a big lion, kind of like a Chronicles of Narnia style lion with a big mane. And I had a feeling if it caught me, it was going to tear me apart and it was going to really hurt and I was going to suffer. But I decided to stop running away from it and to turn and face it. And it charged me, and then it skid to a stop right in front of me. And we hugged and we stared each other in the eyes and we were both crying. And my life was never the same after that. That was a very emotional day for me. Even though I was younger, I felt like something dramatically shifted in my life. And I've had dreams very similar to that, where I had a very emotional experience with a big purple beam of light that actually made me cry later in the day when I was just consciously doing my thing. So the reason why I'm bringing all of this up is because I left Christianity in high school. I had an Aikido sensei that was an atheist. Kind of an interesting character. He's like an atheist cannabis aficionado that taught Aikido. And he was a big influence in my life because he introduced me to ideas that I was not familiar with before. And he introduced me to a documentary that a lot of you have probably heard of called Zeitgeist. And I watched that documentary in 2005, and that jump-started a journey for me down a documentary rabbit hole where I was searching about the shadow government and the Federal Reserve and extraterrestrials. And eventually, after 5 years of that, in 2010, I was introduced to green vegetable juicing, which was not the best place to start, but at least that got me into health. So from 2010 onward, my focus shifted more to studying human health, natural medicine. And I went really heavy down the raw vegan, vegetarian path because for me, it was a spiritual thing. It was more spiritual to not eat animal flesh. That's why I can not get as triggered when I'm approached by vegans, because I used to be there. But I know that it's not a belief thing. Like, we can't shift realities and change human physiology. I know that now because I've seen people that try to do that and they fail miserably, because we do live in a physical world and there are physical rules, and we have a liver that requires animal protein and carbohydrate to function. So for that 4 years, I tried every variation of veganism and supplement protocols to make it work. And about 4 or 5 years in, I broke my 9 years of plant-based with a bison burger, a homemade ground bison cheeseburger, and it totally switched my brain on. And I had to break through the acid forming dogma, acid alkaline, which Adam Bergstrom's been on my show before, and he breaks that down. We don't want to be overly alkaline, that's for sure. That will actually create a lot of disease in the body. But the reason why I bring that up is because that was a turning point in my life when I started to eat healthy animal foods. And that point, around 2015, was the beginning of my recovery, my brain recovery. Because amino acids are so critical for proper mental function. So back to spirituality, while all this was going on, I was going to endless meetup.com groups. I was attending everything from meditations, past life regressions in a group setting, hypnotherapy, telekinesis and telepathy practice, thing called Diksha. I was, quote, attuned to level 2 Reiki, which is essentially energy healing with the hands. I was also attending a lot of health conferences during that time, from cancer summits to different little expos, and networking and just observing. As much as I talk on this show and on social media, and I get tired of hearing my own voice, I was a really quiet kid growing up. And I just like to observe, and I still like to observe. And it might have been that lion dream, increasing my confidence, get out of my introvert shell, to throw myself into all these situations so that I could observe more deeply and really get into these communities and see what was happening. I even hung out with the Hare Krishnas at their house and did the chanting thing, and I was in it all. I even had a urine therapy guy that was featured on National Geographic stay at my first apartment with my roommates, and we actually kind of had to kick him out. But I've had a lot of wild experiences in the health field. People don't think that it gets really wild, but it does. So this is actually a great segue into the next part of the story. So I worked my butt off being a teacher's assistant and then a substitute teacher. And then I worked at a cannabis dispensary for a few years in that industry. And I worked very hard while I was studying. And people always ask me, how do you learn all this stuff, Matt? Well, I was listening to podcasts nonstop, sometimes 8-10 hours a day driving. Looking back, I did Uber and Lyft as well, but cannabis delivery driver or some type of a delivery driver, maybe Uber Eats and stuff like that, is probably the best environment to learn on the go, because you can put on a good podcast like Mitolife Radio and actually learn while you're driving instead of just listening to the radio or something that's not really building you up and giving you value. So I did that. I did demos at Costco. I did demos for different companies at Whole Foods, and essentially worked my butt off for 5-6 years while I was intensely attending conferences and networking and studying health. While I was in the cannabis industry, and by the way, I was not a big fan of THC. I was focusing on CBD, where all my coworkers were getting super baked all day. I was enjoying the CBD, and I even started to get into clean tobacco because I was looking into the benefits of nicotine back then. And so I was living in an RV, renting it out in South San Diego, kind of in a ghetto area. There were drug deals going on at 2 a.m. next door every single night. Wasn't the best environment. health-wise, but I made it work. And somehow in that environment, I started slinging magnesium bicarbonate without a business, just selling it direct to people, making it in the RV with my filtered water and sending it out to people. And I was really successful with that. Enough so that allowed me to eventually quit my job. And then I got into the omega-3 business because I was really into quantum health and I came from the vegetarian mindset. And so I thought that EFAs, essential fatty acids, were a real thing, which they're not. Omega-3 fatty acids are not essential for human health, contrary to what you've been told. And I have multiple podcasts on that. The most recent one was called Omega-3s Are a Scam with Adam Bergstrom. Highly recommend listening to that one. So I started selling algae oil tinctures. And I take my own stuff. I take all the Mitolife supplements. I always take my own supplements. And so I was megadosing DHA algae oil, Schizochytrium algae, every day. And doing basically the opposite of what I talk about today. Taking a bunch of DHA and going out in midday sun in a 55-degree Fahrenheit cold bath. I was doing the whole deal. And I was a one-man show doing that for an entire year. I ended up moving into a little place called Big Bear in Southern California, a little 700 square foot cabin. And after 6 years of working towards it, I was finally my own boss. I was working for myself and renting out my own place. Where before then, I was living check to check, trying to drive enough as a taxi driver for Uber and Lyft to make rent. And so my stress went down. And when my stress went down, my brain functioned better. Granted, I stopped eating meat again. And so I went back and forth eating meat and being vegetarian at least 5 times. Once again, for spiritual reasons, because I thought you can't be quote unquote spiritual if you ate animal flesh. Even though meat is essential for health. I have long-term vegan friends that I have known that broke down severely, almost on their deathbed because of a strict vegan diet for many years. So I've seen it. I know it's real, and there's no replacement for animal foods, especially muscle meat and gelatin or bone broth. So all of the things that I speak out against on this show, I was there. Especially with ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting. It almost killed me. It really almost killed me. Because I thought that was the fountain of youth. I thought the less we eat, the more we suppress and lower our metabolism, the slower our pulse, the lower our heart rate and pulse, the healthier we are. That is not true. And I took it to the extreme. I kept shortening the eating window. I did a 4-hour eating window, then I moved it to 3, and then I moved it to 2 hours at night. I would literally set a timer. So after almost a year of living there in that cabin, I was approached by a person on Instagram that wanted to befriend me and supposedly help spread the message of omega-3s, and especially plant-based omega-3s. And they offered money and a big network to do so. And being my first business, I made some bad decisions that were not in my best interest. And if any of you have ever had a business, usually the first rodeo is not the best, especially if you partner with another person that you don't know very well. So basically the next year and a half of my life was pure hell. There's 2 different types of people in the world. There's service to self people, and then there's service to others people. And this individual I was living with was a service to self individual, meaning that helping others came second to helping themselves. So the environment was toxic. the people I was surrounded with were toxic and spoke down to me. And I didn't have any will or mental strength to study because my cortisol and adrenaline was sky high. And at this point, I was eating for 1 hour a day, tofu and beans primarily, with a cocktail of amino acids and certain supplements, and of course, my own omega-3 supplement. While this was all happening, I discovered that omega-3 DHA causes lipofuscin. I had been introduced to Adam Bergstrom several years before. I actually interviewed him on a podcast that I used to host with my friends called Bliss River. We interviewed Adam Bergstrom, and he planted those seeds. And they eventually sprouted, and I looked into it, and I realized that the substance that I was promoting was not only non-essential, it was harmful to human health. And so that started a very tumultuous journey of stepping back from that industry, stepping back from that person I was partnered with, and getting out of there so that I could start new. And that's exactly what I did. I moved out of Escondido, California, and I moved to Idlewild, which was in the mountains of Southern California, probably the safest place on every level, physical, spiritual, that I could have chosen. And I began to get spiritually attacked. I was in a 5-month-long legal battle, hours and hours a day of phone calls. And once again, I did not have the energy to study because I was just trying to stay alive. I was trying to mitigate the stress. But even while that was happening, I knew that the way I was living was incorrect. And so I started to eat more sugar. I cut out polyunsaturated fats. I cut out the tofu and beans completely, which are PUFA bombs and really horrible for the metabolism. I started taking niacinamide and vitamin E, the 2 supplements that I sell now under Mitolife, and I began my recovery. And this was after being keto and an intermittent faster and skipping breakfast and drinking coffee without cream or sugar or collagen, just drinking it with stevia. And I really wrecked my metabolism. I wrecked my nervous system. While I was working with an attorney to try to get out of this situation and to try to tell people, hey, this substance is toxic. But I couldn't legally for 5 months until this battle was over, and it was a battle. So if you've ever encountered a malicious person, we can call them evil, we can call them malicious, you know that it's more than just mental and emotional and physical. There's usually a spiritual component to the fight. And I'm sure a lot of you listening have looked into who's really behind the scenes, pulling the strings on this, some people call prison planet that we live on, and really seeing how sick and demented and twisted the 1%ers are. And it really drives a person to religion, because you see these music awards and you see how these actors and actresses are dressing and speaking, and you look at Hollywood and you look at what's being shown on Netflix and the TV and the movie screen, and then you look at the Bible and you look back and forth and say, hey, wait a second. These bad people look like they're the bad people that the Bible talks about. And they're wearing devil horns and doing these rituals and openly saying that they're Satanists and etc. And that's what I saw. And then encountering an evil person face to face kind of sealed the deal for me, saying, oh, wow, this is ultimate protection. And I don't think it's a bad thing in that respect to use what protection you feel comfortable with. But I feel like long term, it can be a bad thing if someone gets stuck in it. And so that's what I kind of want to expand on this next part of this episode, is where I'm at now with this. I know that was a heck of a long introduction. And once again, I will repeat, I am not trying to deconvert anyone. If it's working for you, it's working for you, and that's amazing. But in 2019, I got back into Christianity. And I didn't just get back into it, I dove head first. Reading the Bible every day, attending church. And then in 2020, I continued that, reading the Bible every day and watching sermons on YouTube, and then eventually connecting with Christians on social media and bouncing ideas back and forth. And eventually it became very exhausting to me because I noticed these debates going back and forth about denominations. And, there's Lutheran, there's Protestant, there's Catholic, there's Orthodoxy, which is trending right now. And there's all of these different sects of Christianity, some more extreme than others. And then these extreme sects will actually shame the Christians that are not orthodox or that are not as extreme as these people. And so I started to really just see the division. I don't know if it's all the sugar or the shilajit or the animal protein, but over time, I started to see the divide and conquer tactic within the freaking religion. Often you hear about divide and conquer between religious people and non-religious people. In the one religion, there's tons of division. That is mind-blowing to me, because it really shows the prison planet that we live in. It truly is divide and conquer. And I'm not saying kumbaya, one world government, trust everybody. It's not where I'm going with this, but I'm saying that direction, to me, is definitely not the way to go. Where anyone that's a non-Christian cannot be trusted. Anyone that's a non-Christian is automatically a bad or an evil person because the Bible told me so. To me, that is a really toxic mentality. And that will change how we communicate with other human beings face to face. And we saw this year with COVID 1984, social distancing. What's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of the mask? Well, it's cutting us off socially. Not only can you not stand next to somebody anymore, give them a hug, you can't even see their facial expression. It's so obvious to me at this point. So I went all in with Christianity and Jesus Christ and the Bible, and I truly believed it, even more so than when I was a child and attending church every week. But while I was observing the Christian community and really the extreme judgment that they had towards non-Christians or Christians of different denominations, and really the anger and the shame and the aggression, I started to immediately back away and run the other direction. While I was doing that, my back gave out. And this was a freak accident. I stack hay bales for my goats and carry heavy hay. But usually if you throw your back out, it's during the event. It's during a deadlift. It's not delayed. This was delayed about 24 hours before it kicked in. And it was the worst pain I've ever experienced in my life. And it would start around 8, 9 p.m. at night and then go through the morning till around 9, 10 a.m. And it was so painful. I'm a back sleeper. I could not even lay on my back without almost crying. It was that much pain. Again, never experienced that level of pain in my life. I was using all my devices. I was using e-stim on my back. I had electrodes hooked up. Unlimited red light therapy directly on the back. Did nothing. Far infrared sauna. I was CBD. I mean, you name it. I was doing a lot of stuff for it. Systemic enzymes. I was megadosing my dissolvedol. Nothing. It was almost as if my body was saying, Matt, keep throwing stuff at it, but it's not going to do anything. No matter what physically you throw at it, it's not going to do anything. And I prayed about it. I prayed for healing. My friends prayed for me. That did nothing. And that might sound blasphemous to say that, but it truly did nothing. And after 9 days, the pain was so consistent that it made me go inward to really figure it out. It was the accelerated path. And what I came up with is that my experiences are not in congruence with what Christians say or what the Bible says or what evangelical Christianity says. And that is my paranormal experiences. I was never harmed. I never felt in danger. That was my dreaming, my lucid dreams. I've never encountered a demon in my lucid dream. Every lucid dream I've had was positive and had a lasting, positive, beneficial effect on my life. I don't want to get in it too deeply here. Maybe I will when I have a guest on, but my ET experiences, which I have had with extraterrestrials, were all positive. I never was harmed or incapacitated or handicapped with those experiences. It was always very uplifting with extraterrestrials. So all of those three things I mentioned go against the Holy Bible and what Christians would say. They would say that is all demonic, Matt, all three of those areas. But my experience, my entire life, says that it was positive for me. So who am I to believe? If I don't believe my experience, that is a form of disconnection that will cause stress. And I believe that's what I experienced for much of 2020 while the whole world was going nuts with COVID. It was a very revealing year for me, and I'm sure a lot of you as well. So you know how a lot of people are going from a raw vegan diet that they crashed on to a carnivore diet, sometimes a raw primal diet, which is an extreme form of the carnivore diet, which only consists of animal foods and mostly muscle meat. The same could be said for going from New Age to Christianity. And that's what I feel that I did. I don't regret it at all. I feel like it was very important for that time in my life. And although I don't identify as a Christian anymore or don't call myself a Christian, I still have a relationship with Jesus Christ, and I believe that he did walk the earth. I do believe a lot of the Bible was metaphorical. A lot of people say Christ never existed. He was not a real person. There seems to be tons of historical evidence to the contrary of that to show that he was a real person. But all of the guilt and the fear and the shame is so toxic that it can cause severe psychological, emotional trauma. And that's what I've been diving into for the last few months. The idea that we're born into sin. That sounds like a humble thing, like it's kind of harmless, like realizing that we're flawed. But when you come at it from a psychological perspective, that perspective means that from the start, even before I was clipped or circumcised, even before they shot me up with who knows what vaccines, even before all of that, I was still not a good person. I was a sinner. Is that healthy? I don't think so. And I had a really emotional experience a couple weeks ago thinking about that. And I had a nice release. That guilt of just being alive, to me, is mental emotional slavery. It is not healthy to think that from the get-go, from the start, you were messed up before you even did anything. So I can't subscribe to that idea anymore. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't feel healthy to me. It doesn't feel good. It actually stresses me out to think about it. And there's also the apocalypse, the book of Revelations, and then there's the final judgment. And of course, you either go to heaven or you go to hell. And I've been having conversations with friends lately that said that they were traumatized by that, waking up in the middle of the night with sweats, wondering if they're going to make it, if they're going to make the cut. Is that healthy? No, it's not to me. That's fear stacked onto guilt. And then you also have shame, which my understanding comes from other people, for not being good enough in the context of the Bible, for not living by exactly what the Bible says. And there's that social shame that is put on you. And that is a very powerful control system, to have other people around you keep you in line. Because if you get out of line, you're excommunicated. That's what they used to do. You're out. Find a new tribe. Find a new community. You're not living by the books? Get out. And that social isolation raises serotonin. It increases stress. It is equivalent to death. Excommunication equals death. At least it used to. But now, in a social setting, it's still somewhat similar. That's why I'm so grateful for the metabolic health community and the people that are lowering stress, because they're more connected to reality. If the focus is on lowering stress and regulating your nervous system, then you're going to make more rational decisions. I believe you're going to have more rational beliefs. Am I saying go back to New Age? No, absolutely not. But there's some good things there that are real and that are not harmful, because a lot of these extremists will say this is demonic and that's demonic and that's satanic and that's satanic. And we fear what we don't understand. Are there some things that we shouldn't mess with, like a Ouija board? Absolutely. I think there's a lot of stupid stuff that people can do when they get into this spirituality realm. But I think that's coming from a damaged brain. Especially taking psychedelics. I said that in my show with Victor, that I believe a lot of these people taking psychedelics, especially, eating at Olive Garden or going out to standard American restaurants and then, eating an edible to have a spiritual experience, watch out. Because yes, even THC at a small dose will burn out the brain if the brain is already compromised. Magnesium deficiency severely, copper deficiency, severe retinol deficiency, extreme calcification, lipofuscin, and fibrosis. That's where I think most people are at. That's why I believe that physical health is the foundation. Because the brain is an antenna for consciousness. And if that antenna is messed up from toxicity and deficiencies, then we will be disconnected from what's real. And we'll be drawn to these ideas that don't really make a lot of logical sense. Or sense at a nervous system level, that go against our nervous system, that go against human physiology, that go against human nature. So I started to read books and watched YouTube videos that were very interesting, that offered the opposite perspective of what I've been enmeshed in for the last 2 years. One of which was called Sex and God, How Religion Distorts Sexuality by Dr. Darrel Ray. And he also wrote a book called The God Virus. So he's an atheist. Years ago, I read The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. So I don't agree with everything he says. I don't think we should agree with everything that anybody says. We're always going to have some disagreements. But there were some really great points in here, especially about the religious guilt cycle he talks about. He even has a YouTube channel or YouTube clips where he talks about the religious guilt cycle. And without even talking about the physical act of sexuality, just the thought, just sexual thoughts, which is human nature, is a sin according to the Bible and according to people in the Christian community. So how harmful is that to psychology, to have this kind of mental police going in your brain 24/7? And how do you stop that from happening when you dream? Because I know nocturnal emissions are very common, especially with men. And in fact, physiologically, again, this is another thing that goes against human physiology. For a man to have a dream, he has to become erect. So what's the balance there? Should you try to shut that down? Maybe go monk style, maybe raw vegan. So, all these things I started to question. And to me, the guilt around thoughts was the last straw for me. I started to look in the mirror at my face and see the furrow between my brow growing deeper and deeper. And that stress that's held, that tension, oftentimes is right there on the face. And it could be caused by extreme dieting, keto, fasting, restricting animal protein, restricting sugar. But it can also be caused by spiritual beliefs. And sometimes it's both. That's when the body gets really harmed, when all the things are stacked against it and everything's increasing cortisol and you're trying to micromanage your thoughts. And, oh, shoot, I had this sexual thought when I was out at the mall or whatever. I don't know if anyone goes to the mall anymore, but you know what I mean? How is it possible to control your thoughts? It's not. They just happen, right? So I highly recommend that book, and even Darrel Ray's YouTube channel. And he actually has an organization called recoveringfromreligion.org. And he doesn't just focus on Christianity. He talks about Hinduism, Islam, and how all the major religions, even Baha'i, even Buddhism, all of the religions want to control sex. And when you really get down to the Bible, that is the number one focus. From what I've understood, it is controlling sex. Because the Garden of Eden story with Adam and Eve, what happens? Well, Eve eats from the forbidden tree that she's not supposed to eat from because the snake convinced her to eat from it. And both Adam and Eve realize that they're naked and they feel ashamed. And what preachers teach us, pastors, is that they felt ashamed because they realized their sexuality and that they were not covered up. Maybe not all pastors say that, but from my schooling, that's what they said. Okay, so again, going back to sex, from the beginning, from Genesis, the start of the Bible, is putting that message in your head. Nakedness is a sin. Nakedness equals sexuality equals sin. That's what I believed. I've been rereading this book that I read back in college by William Bramley called The Gods of Eden. It was written in 1989, 2 years after I was born. And it talks about all of these biblical stories, and it offers a unique historical perspective of what it was actually about and what actually happened. And yes, it does involve extraterrestrials. So if you're not interested in that subject, you might not like it. But what that book proposed is that they felt bad being naked, Adam and Eve, because they realized that nakedness meant slavery and that they were in a little prison cell created by the custodians, as this book calls them, or the ET extraterrestrial handlers. And when she ate from the tree, because they didn't want her to eat from it, they both realized at the same time that they were slaves in a slave system. And once again, that would be called blasphemy, right, from the biblical perspective. But when it's illegal to question things, you have to really watch out. And that's another red flag with me with traditional religion. If you can't question something without someone getting aggressive, then there's probably something there. And this book struck a chord for me when I was in community college, and I read it cover to cover, and it felt true. I was so shocked that I came across this book, because it's a fairly short, easy read, but it essentially summarizes human history. And again, you don't need to agree with all of it, but there's definitely really interesting points to consider in that book. Another resource that really helped me, because I didn't really have too many people to talk about it with when I was going through it, because you kind of corner yourself in these communities and then you have no support, which is another method of control that religion uses. But Trauma Talk on YouTube is a really good channel that I just randomly came across. And this woman actually focuses on what's called purity culture. She has a video perspective on purity culture, trauma, rape culture, shame, and guilt. And she actually postulates that purity culture leads to rape culture. And this is yet another point that I realized. You know, the stereotypical priest or the Pope or the Vatican and all the evil stuff they're doing with children and all the priest and children stuff and, you know, molestation stuff. Why does that happen? Well, how about the extreme suppression? When I tell you don't think of a pink rhinoceros, what are you going to do? You're going to think of a pink rhinoceros. So religion says, don't think about sex, don't think about sex. What is it doing? It's making you think about it all the time. I think that's by design. I think it's another control system. So she also has a video, Purity Culture's Biggest Lie. She has a reaction video to actually a couple that I'm fairly familiar with, Nate and Sutton. And she talks about virginity and value. Does virginity equal value? Talking about premarital sex, which is a big thing that actually Dr. Darrel Ray speaks about at length. And that is another toxic idea, because in our society, that is unnatural, in my opinion, and unpractical, and in fact can cause a lot of harm and lead mostly to divorce. Dr. Darrel Ray goes through those statistics in his book and on his YouTube channel, how religious people have the highest rates of divorce because they don't know what they're getting into and they jump into it head first, and then they have an unhappy marriage because they jumped into it because the Bible told them to. So I know I threw a lot at you right there, but I just wanted to kind of make it stream of consciousness there at the end and just share my thoughts on the whole thing. And I'm once again just so grateful to be connected to these people talking about the nervous system and trauma from a really balanced human perspective, because I think people forget that we're human, right? Whether extreme new age trying to ascend, which is unnatural, or extreme evangelical Christian orthodox trying to ascend past their sexual thoughts or past their humanness or their human body, that's unnatural. So once again, going from raw vegan to carnivore, going from New Age to Christianity, is there a connection? Yes. I see it all the time. And I think children or teens that have had traumatic sexual experiences, whether it be rape or otherwise, are drawn specifically to Christianity because of how focused it is on sex and sexuality. So again, you don't have to agree with me on any of this stuff. If it doesn't resonate with you, then just hope you can continue with me here on the journey. People that have been following me for the last decade know that I am very open to change and to sharing my change. And when it comes to authenticity, when you're quote unquote in the public eye, a lot of people will change and then they'll pretend that they didn't change because they have books, they have seminars, they have an identity that was built around what they were talking about. And I don't see me changing from the carbohydrate and the PUFA thing and the metabolism thing anytime soon, but I hope that 10 years from now, I have evolved and I have changed and that I'm doing things differently. And I hope the same for you as well, because that is a part of being human. It's changing, it's growing, it's adapting, and it's a beautiful thing. Well, I think that's all I have to say on that subject. Maybe I'll be expanding on it in the future. But happy 2021. Happy New Year to everybody. And my advice to you moving into 2021 is to lower your stress. And things will continue to happen around us at the world level, in your neighborhood, in your state, in your country. But you have control over your nervous system and how you respond. And you also have control over your environment. You can leave your environment and move into another one. You could leave a community and go into another one. You are safe to do so. You're safe to choose who you wish to be friends with and who you choose to be vulnerable with. I've found in my own life that having close friends that I could be open with and that are respectful of my beliefs and change and thought processes, that is extremely beneficial and helpful in my evolution as a human being and in the healing process. And I would just encourage you to really dive into guilt. If you feel guilty for being alive and breathing, just please question that and really consider how much stress that's causing your physiology, because that could be a huge stressor, and it absolutely was for me. So I'll put the links below to all the different things that I referenced. And I have exciting news for next week. First week of the year, a couple Mitolife products will be back. That's assuming that UPS doesn't screw up during this crazy time. That's Dissolvidol and Purely K. Really apologize for the wait. We had Black Friday, and then things have just been really slow. A lot of things going wrong at the end of the year. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. Just things are moving slower. Things are not as efficient. But we'll get back on track. And I really believe that 2021 will be a lot smoother. And I would encourage you to get into homesteading, or at least move that direction of producing your own food and maybe getting some firearms, because that is true security. With everything being as unstable as it is, the one thing I'm focused on is food and water. So if you have those two things and protection, some firearms, some guns, then you're doing pretty good. when you add community to that, and maybe the CLF protocol. So I'm really excited to have really awesome guests on for 2021. I'm truly like a kid in the candy store with Mitolife Radio because I'm able to have access to brilliant minds of people that I can pick their brain and, take what I like and integrate it into my lifestyle. And so far, it's just been beyond my imagination. So mitolife.co, you can order the Mitolife products, matt-blackburn.com. I actually just threw up a bunch of new recommended products up there. EMF blocking clothing from No Choice Protect. I actually recently wore the joggers and the jacket to California, and I felt so much calmer. Usually I'm twice as jittery, and my nervous system felt calmer. And you could take an RF meter and put it under the jacket and take it out if it has a sound function, and you could hear the difference. Your organs are not getting slammed as much when you're wearing an EMF protection jacket. So that really works. And I also threw up there a couple items from Get Chroma. This is actually a light therapy company. Near-infrared flashlight. If I had any sort of eye issues, I would focus on only the near-infrared wavelength. And I think it's very affordable for the power. It's 8 AA batteries. It's just 30 seconds a day in each eye. Really beneficial for a lot of eye issues. And that's called triple LT, low-level laser light therapy. And I also threw up there, I actually have this up above me right now behind my monitor, is the Sky Portal. The Sky Portal is a circular LED light made up of 480 nanometers, which is like sky blue, and 810 nanometers, which is near infrared. And you could actually change the ratio. You can have them both at 100%, which I do, or you can dim whichever one you want. But it's supposedly to connect you to the outdoors and actually drowning out the short wavelength blue light from the screens with long wavelength blue light. So I think it's a really intelligent thing to use. It's a little bit of investment, but if you work at an office desk like I do pretty much, then I think it's a necessity, especially if you live in a northern latitude, like I'm up here in Idaho. I could use all the light therapy I can get. I also threw up there New Calm recently, and this device has been a game changer for me. It sounds super gimmicky, but it's these really large files, like 700 megabyte files on this app that you listen to either 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes. You can select the time, and it's music with binaural beats. And I was very skeptical when I bought it. I didn't think I would feel it, but it's kind of like a forced meditation, I guess is a way to put it, where if you can't really meditate that well, it puts you in that zone, that theta state, really easily. So I've been actually using that in a hyperbaric chamber with the Apollo Neuro, which is like a little wrist vibration thing that also affects your nervous system and your heart rate variability. So I kind of stack those three things, which is really advanced. But I would say the New Calm plus the Apollo Neuro, a little wrist strap that sends vibrations into your system, that combo is incredible. And I've just really been focusing on de-stressing, lowering my stress, increasing nervous system resilience, activating my parasympathetic nervous system, my rest and digest. And I just feel like life is so much better. I'm making better decisions. Good people are coming into my life. Wrong people are leaving. And everything's just kind of balancing out when your nervous system is regulated. So thank you guys so much. Matt Blackburn on Instagram. And I'm also on Facebook. And I have a YouTube channel, Matt Blackburn. And then I have a Mitolife Academy that you can join. The link will be on one of the videos on my YouTube channel. And that's 4 private videos a month with a private Q&A where I share latest research, the supplements that I'm taking, I'm trying, new devices that I'm trying. It's kind of just like a behind the scenes VIP thing with the Mitolife Academy. So thank you guys. Really appreciate you sharing the podcast and all of your support throughout 2020. And let's make this year awesome.